here.
Guzikowski's here.
Here.
Still here.
Alrighty, we're gonna go through approval of minutes from 1:10. Any changes or corrections?
Next second.
Roll call?
Dukniak, aye.
Gill, aye.
Guzikowski, aye.
Scully, aye.
Okay, so we've got some visitors here for number 10. So we're gonna try to move number 10 up and do that first. So that way you guys don't have to sit and listen through the whole. All right,
Hurry.
guys ready? The 10?
We'll be taking that, Alderman Guzikowski.
Got it.
Morning, Board. In front of you is a consideration, a motion to install no stopping, standing, parking signs along Marquette from Shepherd to Quincy, probably a little bit beyond, actually. It's in the area that's a rural section. This came in front of us from Alderman Kurkowski, was contacted by a local resident. Some of the concerns that they have out there were parking during the fall when the youth football program has practices at the park there. So the section there is probably about 22 feet wide. There's a wider gravel shoulder on the south side. That's where most of the parents do park. There are some that park on the north side. When that is created, there's very little shoulder on the north. The parents are parking out on the roadway, creating a situation where minimal passable, I guess no two-way traffic, especially when you're doing this with either a fire vehicle or any kind of emergency vehicle. So there was concerns on safety, and that was brought forward to us. We did reach out to both the Oak Creek PD and fire department. They had no objections to the stop sign or to the no parking, stopping, or standing signs placed. Engineering at this point does not have any, but we have nothing against it either. So if you have any questions, we'd be more than happy. I know Alderman Kurkowski is present, and he wanted to say some words also.
Alderman Kurkowski, want to speak to it yet? Or wait till we're done talking.
Hi, Alderman Kurkowski, 1st District. This came to my attention by a couple of residents. One of is Bob, who came today. So what happened is, just like Matt said, and so I went out there and I looked at the situation, and it was pretty rough at times. And we had even, police department and the fire department did their due diligence, and I even contacted the president of Oak Creek Youth Football. And now this is potentially a year-round issue, because Bob was telling me that they had sledding just recently, and so the issue was there also. So so I had contacted Oak Creek Youth Football president, and I said, hey, this is the situation. Again, let me back up. This football is the catalyst to bring this forward for a year-round issue. So he said, yeah, he'll send out an email to all the participants. So I went out there one night just to see how things were going, and residents parents were parked on the north side. They're parked on the grass of the residents, and some residents were putting on orange cones to keep them off their property. And I asked one guy, I said, hey, did you get an email from your president about parking here? And he goes, yeah, but this is an easement, so I just thought I could park here. And so we just had these issues, and so that's why I brought it to the board and asked you to consider. Original request was no parking, but you see, parking compared to no stopping, standing, or parking is a different issue, because if you're just stopping there to pick up your kids, then you could stay there for as long, a few minutes. So we were asking, there's like no stopping, standing, or parking whatsoever in that area, just to keep that area clear. And like Matt said, the road does narrow a little bit. I know the fire department went out there with parking. It was just on the park side, and but when they're on both sides of the road, it's pretty tight there. So I don't have anything else to add if Bob wants to come up and say a few things, but thanks for your consideration. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Alderman Kirkowski.
Said it all. You know, this has been.
Sorry, need your name and address.
Oh, my name is Robert Dominski. I live at 710 East Marquette Avenue. And I sort of want to speak for my neighbor who is now deceased. She had it a lot worse than I did. They would pour 4 or 5 cars on her property over there. So I don't know whoever's going to purchase that property, they may have the same issue.
Can you describe which property is hers on
My
the
pro-
graphic?
I'm directly, see, that is a little confusing, I think. People can't tell. I am, the middle property, like, I'm almost dead center in the middle of that. The lady that I'm talking about is to the, she's closer to Shepherd over there. And there's actually only 2 properties that face the park. It's mine and the neighbor to the west of me. But Julie's faces Shepherd, but that land was all their land. They broke it off. I built my house there. But she had it a lot worse than I did. But she's not here to speak, so I guess I'm speaking on her behalf now. And I know this is not the time and place for that, but I've requested if they put angle parking in there, that would completely solve this whole problem. Even if they just put gravel down, they could fit a lot more vehicles there. On an angle, they wouldn't be driving all over the place and boxing things up, but I guess that's for another time. But I'm hoping we get the signs up there, because it does affect my neighbor to the west of me, and even the guy on the east side, they block his driveway. He had to come out and he said, "Were you going somewhere?" And some of the people are rude. The kids are great, but sometimes the parents are, I don't know, they're rude sometimes. So. But I guess that's it. I'm hoping this goes through. Thank you.
Comments or questions, discussion?
Yeah,
What do you
I had
guys
a
think?
Question. At the deal here, OCYF is typically the culprit or people associated with whatever's going on there? Is it other times of the year, is there softball games going on here, or other organized stuff that's causing parking?
That's a primary catalyst, like Alderman Kirkowski mentioned. I do live in the neighborhood, so I do frequently go past this park. Ever since they did put in the pickleball, there's a significant amount of parking, but it's primarily on the south side for that. There are other occasions when people do park out there. That would be like sledding, like they mentioned, but it's been pretty limited in the last few years due to our snowfall. But other than that, football is probably your primary catalyst, so during the fall.
All right, so do you make this park useless for OCYF if we can't park here?
No.
This
is just on the north side that we would
So
put the
are
no
they
parking.
parking on both sides for a
Yes, they
reason?
are. They're parking on both sides.
That just means because they need to, or is it just because they have no other choice?
Wouldn't be able to tell you. I'm going to guess that it's full on the south side, so they just choose to park on the north side. Now there's no requirement you to stay for for practice. Typically, parents do know.
This is
Yeah, I know.
do
there
they
are
hold
lo-
games there, or is that just practice?
It's just practice. Usually 2 teams practice in that park, one on the south side, one on the north side.
And the rationale for stopping standing besides is what? You find
So people are not in their cars. I mean, you can park your vehicle, be in your car, and you're not considered parked. It's considered stopping.
literally
So
Because
you
they're
literally
tired.
you could literally sit in your car. Legal stance in the statutes, you are not parked. Parking means you have to turn off your vehicle, step out of it, and shut your door. That would be considered parked.
Any other feedback?
The concern I had Ken, is by limiting the amount of parking that's available around the park. I'm not completely familiar with the park. Are you restricting its overall use? Or is there adequate parking? I see Quincy Avenue, Lenox, that still makes it welcoming to the residents of our community. Why take action that park?
So there's multiple, roads like you mentioned,
Okay, so there are
Dugnac. So, yeah, there
roads
are
that-
people that park on the south side of the park.
Okay,
I believe that's Lenox, that park there to utilize the softball field and the other youth football team that actually practices on the south side. That's where most of those parents park. Pickleball court, basketball court, they do park on the north side, but on the south side of Marquette, utilize that gravel that's already out there. So restricting it on the north side of Marquette, only at times when all of the facilities are being used and youth football is where you'd be limiting the ability to park.
in Lenox.
Yes.
Have you received any feedback from other residents, along Quincy or along Lenox with parking, by park users?
No, the,
you know, this
those roads, no complaints from residents there. It's simply the Marquette.
One on Marquette.
And you take into consideration, there's no curbs there, so parents can park up on the grass of the residents. And the road seems to get narrow in that area, so versus Quincy and the other roads that have curbs there. This road just seems to get narrow just right in that area.
My biggest concern is certainly just go to park on the option for the residents, and you're taking away the ability for them to use it. But I guess there is ample parking around the
Is there parking for surface parking lot for the park?
No, there isn't. The only area to park would be along the roads that are adjacent to it.
Any other comments down there?
I've driven by it and I can see the problem in football season, but the rest of the time
Okay. Ready?
Finally found it. Hey, Matt, just to clarify, we found them, folks who were parking on that terrace area between the sidewalk and the road.
The area they're parking on is the northern side of Marquette, in the areas of the two homes.
Oh, okay.
Generally speaking, the areas of the two homes that is west of Shepherd.
West of Shepherd?
Yeah, where you see the grass that
Yeah.
goes all the way up. Technically, it is public right away. They are required to maintain it, though. The residents are required to maintain it.
When the argument came up that they're parking on residents' property,
Technically, they're not, but there's potential for rutting and maintenance
understood.
cost onto the resident.
Just more narrow.
No, less than that.
oh, less.
Yes.
Some of this you're not. Problem is,
Right, to be a turnoff. I think that there is.
Alrighty. Guys, good? Any other questions? Then if not, a motion?
Dukenyak move that the Board of Public Works and Capital Assets approves a motion, approves the installation of no stopping, standing, or parking signs on East Marquette Avenue across from
Roll call.
Dukenyak, aye.
TLI.
Guzekowski, aye.
Valley, aye.
Thank you. Alrighty, back up to 4.
I can take that one.
Alright.
So I just have a couple of updates from the last 2 common council meetings. So the ones on January 17th and February 7th. So on this January 17th, council approved the MMSD funding for the Oak Creek Police Department and Abendschein Park parking lot projects. So that was very exciting. And then on February 7th, the plan of finance was presented and approved, and it came in at around 11.2 million. The first phase of the Drexel Town Square, the streetscape on Drexel, those improvements were approved to Grafe for $165,000. So that's the first phase of the streetscape project. Engineering was also authorized to enter into design contracts for a bridge on 6th Street with the Department of Transportation, the city, and Collins Engineers. And then there was also a state local bridge superstructure replacement that was also approved for the 6th Street bridge as well. So, were there any other that I missed? Okay, sounds good. That's what I've got.
Yeah. Alrighty, thank you. Number 5, consider a motion to enter into a contract with R.A. Smith for design and soil borings on 6th Street and West Marquette Avenue.
So this is directly related to the bridge work that's being done or that's proposed for 6th. We've also included Marquette where there's some bad water main in there that needs to be replaced. This project would hire R.A. Smith to do the design for both of those so we can get ahead of the project. Coordinate then with the 2 bridge work projects. Probably 2024, 2025 construction on this, but we need to get this going. We know that materials are quite a bit out in our lead time on those. So hiring R.A. Smith.
Said 2024, 25.
Yeah, yeah.
Makes sense to me. Any comments or questions? Motion?
Yeah, motion to enter into a contract with R.A. Smith for design and soil borings for
Roll call.
Dukenyak, aye.
Gale, aye.
Guzekowski, aye. And number 6, consider a motion to approve utility vouchers for the payment of the remainder 2022.
Yeah, you will see 2 voucher packets here. This one is just for 2022. Second one will be beginning of 2023.
Questions or comments? That motion?
Gale, second.
Roll call.
Dukenyak, aye.
Gale, aye.
Guzekowski, aye. And number 7, approve a motion to go utility vouchers for payment for 2023 amount of $314,000. Any comments or questions? Motion?
Gale move to approve the utility vouchers for payment in 2023 in the amount of $314,969.35.
Dukenyak, second.
Roll call.
Dukenyak, aye.
Gale, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Aye.
And then we have informational and administrative and operations report.
On the utility side, I only have a couple things to note on the administrative report. Just the fact that we're starting out the year quite well at 10.3% up from the previous year. But that's just a representation of January only. It certainly is no predictor of what's going to happen in the future, just relative to the previous year. But it is strong both in production and in sales. They reflected each other. On distribution, we had a water main break on Sunset. The guys were out yesterday as well repairing a valve that was broken during that operation. So it was actually a little bit of an extended, water was maintained, but a little bit of an extended service call out there in order to go back. A little different, special, and that's all we really have.
Thank you.
Satellite.
Yeah, not a fan. What we did, we're still trying as we have time to go out and look for those leaks, but the problem that we had, one of the biggest problems with it is that the 2 slides that we took of 1 year versus the next year, there were only 2 duplicates on the 100 points of interest, only 2 duplicates. That seems really strange. We had a number of known leaks that didn't appear on either of them. I actually have a conference call coming up with those folks at Estera next week or the week after to kind of discuss this a little bit. We're just really disappointed. We've gone down on several of the leaks and haven't found anything. So I guess the guys are getting a little bit discouraged. How often are you going to be digging holes and finding nothing? We did find a couple that we could verify that were leaks. So that's great. We found a couple hydrant leaks. The satellite image system tells you of a leak, doesn't tell you what kind. So we did find some things for sure, but I think by and large, for the money, it wasn't worth it. Like I said, we'll be having that discussion with them. The biggest disappointment is the 2 don't seem to line up. I understand that they're going to have some areas that they can't see with one slide versus the next one. We're fine with that, but they have virtually no overlap.
Mike, that thing is actually doing some kind of spectrography.
Yes.
So it really should be picking up the chemical, right?
So it searches for water and then uses their algorithm to determine of the water that it's searching for, whether it would be treated water or not. They're not looking for chlorine or any kind of chemical
Okay.
like that. It's a characteristic of the water, and it's electrical conductivity is what they're zoning in on. Part of the problem, though, for me is, and they openly say it, this is a global product that they're trying to market, and so they have to homogenize what is our water versus Boston's water versus, you know, Saudi Arabia's water in order to identify drinking water versus groundwater or other water. So because of that, same thing with soil conditions, all of that has to be factored globally, which to me downgrades what you get locally.
To make this meaningful, you have to find big leaks you don't know about.
Yes,
They would
yes.
typically show up anyway somewhere along the line? Or do you not know that?
I would say 70 to 80% of them do show up. We have some leaks that we've run across over the years that never surface anywhere. We had no idea they were there. To me, a fair example of that is out on Putes Road, Putes and Howell. We had a leak. It was coming over the curb. It was relatively small. It was there for a year. We dug on it a couple of times. We had a big repair there. But when we dug on it the first time and filled that area full of stone, it sat for the next probably 3-4 months, not a stitch of water coming out. The water found another place to go, and I think there are a fair amount of those leaks out. We were really hopeful that the satellite program was going to pull that out.
To make it worthwhile, you have to save treated water.
Yeah.
Treated water
Yeah.
loss.
Yeah.
Right? That's
Yep.
the whole point of it. Otherwise,
Yep.
part of the deal.
Right.
Yeah. You're gonna find the nose and
Exactly.
I've got a quick question for you, Mike. How are we doing for the CD tank?
So we're in our alternatives analysis now. That is ongoing. Next steps on that are identifying the groundwater that's around the existing tank, doing some testing on it to determine what threats are in that groundwater out there. And then from there, we'll move on. That'll inform whether we can do anything with the existing tank as part of the solution. So once we have that done, then we'll push on with it. That work largely can't be done until after. Kind of a bit of a stand.
How are we coming along with the DNR?
So the DNR folks are trying to understand what our timeline is. They want that and need that project done. They recognize there's a problem, as do we, and they want to see solutions over there. They're not sitting around not doing anything anymore. So yeah, we've met with them. They're very interested in finding out what our timeline is. They have offered to go and meet with the Public Service Commission, try and get us all together on take any help we can get. We're happy for that.
Any other question or comments? Alrighty. Number 9, consider a motion to approve purchase of crowd control equipment to outfit 6 police personnel as a part of mobile incident response.
Morning.
Morning, Chief.
Dave Stecker, Chief of Police. We're coming back because we had this approved as part of the CIP process to have our mobile incident response team equipped. As I'm sure you've gone through and read, the important part is to make sure that they all look the same. Otherwise, there could be that component of them being picked out and then isolated from the group. The big thing is to make sure that we have crowd control available to us, and doing so on the Suburban Mutual Incident Response Team gives us that multiplier because we've got all the agencies as part of the MOU to respond should we have a big incident. In 2020, we saw those start to happen with the DNC. With the RNC coming, we're expecting to be prepared again for anything that may happen in the area. So one of the things that we did have, though, unfortunately, with everything else in the last year, prices have gone up. Originally, we were approved for $32,682. The current quoted price is $47,794.74. That left us with $15,000 that we're over. I do have the ability through the DOA grant that we have from the state to use that towards the body worn camera equipment. I cannot use that grant on any other equipment. If I could, I would be coming forward with that. So I'm able to bring it down $9,200 for that part, with the remaining $5,900 and change that will be taken care of through other financial means that I've spoken with Max about to make sure that that can be covered. And I would be happy to answer any questions you guys have further and related.
Is 6 adequate enough, or do we need more?
So one of the things that, I mean, we would always love more. The problem with that is that with our staffing, I can only give up so many people to be a part of the team. And to have that team made of 5 to 6 people is ultimately what we need, so that you have those 5 to 6 member teams from all the other agencies, and then we have 30, 40 of them together that can go out in different isolated incidents.
Thank you.
David, remind me,
So we have several commanders that are throughout it. Actually, Lieutenant McQuestion is our commander from our side, and he's one of the assistant commanders for the county. And I believe it's Wauwatosa, better. There is the actual over commander on everything, but they train together and they come together. So it's not just isolated trainings. They come together, they train together, so that when something does happen and they need to respond, they're all acting the same.
the team is deployed, is it the local office, or is there, considered as a team command?
So the team command would help with that. So that would be that part that Wauwatosa is the lead on. However, our request is always going to be from what we're requesting. So if Oak Creek's requesting it, we have our commander there that's going to feed back and forth, and through our command structure with our incident commander, that would just be like a task force that's out there that we would be controlling and asking them to come in. Or with that, if we have any sort of overwatch, or our tactical team would also be out there to oversee them as well.
If it's locally deployed, you're in charge?
We're always, whoever that municipality is, they always have the say on what's going on.
Sense to me. Questions? Anyone? Motion?
So unfortunately, with a lot of these things going out there, the stockpiling of it isn't there. Plus, the one vendor that we actually used previously went out of business. So it's a little supply and demand plus who's actually out there developing everything that's available. So that is the cheapest option that we can get, that's as well connected with everything else that we have as well.
Any other comments? If not, motion?
Gill, second.
Roll call.
Dukenyak, aye.
Gill, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Kelly, aye.
Ernie. Number 11, consider a motion to recommend proceeding with design and preferred alternative for reconstruction of the intersection West Putes and Liberty Lane and Southwood Creek Drive.
Thank you. Prior to moving on to this item, I kind of wanted to cover a couple other topics that we missed here. Sorry. So I provided a lakefront construction activity common council approval schedule within your packets. If anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer those at this time. But what we wanted to do is provide just kind of a quick overview of what's we're anticipating happening in the next 4 to 6 months at the lakefront. We have 3 major projects that are on docket, one being the revetment and bluff stabilization, which we do anticipate going out to let this month, later this month, with approvals and bids coming in next month and approvals in April, with hopefully construction starting in May. That also includes the demolition of the old Peter Cooper building. That's the last building actually really standing out there at the lakefront from the old factories. That will be also on the same time schedule. And then also the North Park planning. We're looking to move that into actual design. So those are the 3 major projects that are on docket for this summer. If you guys have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer those. This will also be provided to the Common Council for discussion if we need it at the next council meeting. That is the demo of Peter Cooper. Yeah. Those will be out to bid also within this month.
And all the soil that was hauled, that's on site now, right?
That is already on site from the MMSD stormwater management pond that they were doing.
You get all that we expected?
We were a little shy and probably not as good a quality as what we expected, but we have other options that we're looking at and providing other alternatives for contractors as they bid, which is use of crushed stone, which we'd actually be able to utilize on the Peter Cooper building, crushed concrete, and that gradation that they would need for the bluff stabilization. We're looking at options. That would probably reduce the cost of the revetment,
We'll pay to
we're
get rid of
hoping,
this stuff.
because
Oh, they do.
they would get rid of it. You know, we did have that in the estimate for the Peter Cooper as far as part of it, crushing. Just a matter of now we can utilize it or provide that option for the bidding contractors on the revetment and bluff stabilization. Any further questions? Nothing? One other note I'd like to make, I know we provided our kind of a synopsis of what's going on in engineering and inspection. We were able to offer a position to our building inspector, which he did accept. He'll be starting March 7th. His name is Kurt Gorski. He comes from Milwaukee, actually a resident of Oak Creek, so pretty excited to have him on board. He'll be starting March 7th, full-time building inspector. That's one positive thing that's come out of our department in the last month. We're still looking for our stormwater engineer, and you guys know we have not had one applicant yet. So
Oh.
we're still.
That's the one where we lost the state planning skill?
With Tony, yes. So we did hire Scott Satula,
That's right.
who's doing part-time. He's been here a couple days a week and has actually fit in really well. Knows the program, knows the software. In the first day, he was already reviewing plans. So we're catching up on those very quickly. Other questions? Okay. Yeah, we'll move on to that item. So we're looking, so before you, we're looking for, I guess, you guys to provide a recommendation on the preferred alternative to take in front of the Common Council for the intersection of West Pewitz and South Liberty Lane. If you all recall, recently we had Grafe hired as consultants to do an intersection analysis. Requested that they look at multiple options and alternatives. So what they did review on these options and alternatives were what they call compact roundabouts, normal roundabout, and then signalized intersection, and actually they reviewed the existing intersection. Give me a second here, I gotta bring up a presentation we have. So Andrew Ledger is also here from our department. He's our design engineer. He was kind of the leader for our group, corresponding and working with our consultants on this. Have any questions as we go through this in regards to the report? Andrew's probably going to be our best option here for answering them. Try to work together to give you guys as much information as possible. Bear with me here, I usually don't have to do this, so. We kind of put together a real quick little presentation here that kind of gives you more of a high level view and a easier digestible picture of what that report provided us. So just to give you a little thing on the existing intersection, in 2018 there was approximately 11,100 vehicles per day through that intersection on Pewitz Road, which is your major road, and probably one of your major issues in causing delays on your minor approaches. Obviously, the posted speed limit is 35 on Pewitz and 25 on the minor approaches. It's a stop-controlled intersection on minor approaches only. As you know, it's free flow on Pewitz. There were some minor intersection modifications in 2017, and those included additional left turn for the eastbound to northbound, and also basically kind of defined more of that median area for refuge if needed for traffic on north and south as they either took a left or tried to do a through movement. So there was some crash history taken into account 2017 to 2021. Wanted to pull out the major points of accidents are right angle and single vehicle. The single vehicle or sideswipe type issues, single vehicles were mainly people in the outer lane heading westbound, trying to either make a quick movement as they're coming through the intersection because it's a drop lane, control their cars running the curb, just minor things along those lines as far as them. Right angle is primarily people getting what they consider like the T-bone, kind of either doing a left turn and getting hit through movements, things along those lines, or left turns and getting hit. Those tend to be your most severe outside of head-on collisions, which we did not have any. Level of service, that's how the intersection operates, and those were on minor approaches were level service F in the existing condition, which is basically failure. That is one of the reasons why we are addressing this intersection at the time. So one of the alternatives, traffic signals. Everyone knows what a traffic signal is, pretty standard. So the lane configurations, westbound there was no changes. So you'd have your left turn lanes, your through, and your right lane. Basically that drop lane as you enter the intersection. Eastbound would now have dedicated lanes for left turn, right turn, and a through. We currently only have a left turn and then it's a through right shared. Southbound and northbound would be restriped for left turn and shared right through. The picture, the diagram actually shows left and through, which are not basically our preference. We would prefer just left turn and then a right through. Tends to be easier for people to address and go through the intersections. With this option, we included some pedestrian crossing improvements, which included having the west side have our crossings, which now they currently do not. You would have to cross the minor roads and then come down on the east side. This would be included on the improvements. The level of service for all the approaches does improve to a level of service C, which is acceptable and peaks all the way into 2043, so our design year. Traffic signal warrants, now this is a big kind of to-do as far as recommendations. So the manual and uniform traffic control devices, which we utilize in order to basically create our recommendations on signalized intersections, stop control, or whatever, does not meet any of the warrants for a minimum of 5 years. Projected out, it's over 8 or 10 years before we'd actually meet any warrants to basically support the installation of signals at this intersection. And in all honesty, signalized intersections really do not address any of your major accidents. So we'd still have the potential for right angle crashes because we're not really controlling that at that point.
But I mean, we have to assume that signalized intersection facto. People are having crashes there. It's not because of the intersection.
There's two ways to look at that. Yes, it does probably increase some safety because now you have it more controlled. There is vision issues, obviously, when you start dealing with your right turns and your left turns at this intersection. So we'll go into more detail on that as far as when we get to the cost estimate on what's actually really included within the designs that are shown in the cost. So we'll discuss that a little further.
I had one other question. You guys, in the state does this modeling? Who actually does this modeling?
That is done through our consultants. They have programs called Synchro. It's just a standardized program used in consultants for DOT. It's used pretty much nationwide. It's a pretty standardized system.
So, I mean, that gives you a overall snapshot. That gives you a grade during the day. We're talking a solution here for basically 2 time periods during a day. So that an average grade, or is that a grade that solves that problem during those troublesome times?
Peak, during the peak times. So your AM and your PM peaks. That's where they generally will look at your level of service, because if you are not meeting your level of service during those times, you're during the off-peak, probably meet them. I mean, that's just
Okay,
the
so
way it goes.
it does address the peak
Yes,
problem period.
that's the primary source of when you do an intersection analysis. You're really looking at the PM and the AM peaks. You really wanted to address those, because if you don't address those, you're not going to be addressing the problems at the intersection. Let's move on to roundabout. Any questions on the traffic signal before we move on? So the roundabout alternatives, we did look at basically 3 types of roundabouts. 2 of them were the compact roundabouts, and one was the full-size roundabout, which is 140-foot inscribed interior diameter, which is basically the diameter of the circle itself, inside circle. The 2 compact roundabouts failed, so we pretty much are not even going to recommend those. Those are off the table. So we brought forward the full roundabout alternative. So obviously with lane configurations, east, northbound, and southbound, they're all single lane entry. So this is a single lane roundabout, it's not a double, as perceived by some, so this will be a single lane. The westbound would have a right turn bypass lane and a single lane entry for the through movements. This will address some of those concerns with that drop lane. Now you will be forced, you'll have islands, you'll have more control as far as how people handle moving into that intersection on that outer lane. Obviously we have improved pedestrian and bicycle crossings. One thing to note on here, your pedestrian and your bicycle crossings actually occur behind the first car that's queued. So if you have a car that's waiting to enter the intersection, generally your pedestrians enter behind them, which actually creates a better, safer condition for the pedestrians, because the people that are directly behind the first one are paying more attention to what's around them versus just the vehicles to the left. So now you have a little bit better connection between the pedestrian and the vehicle. The level service for all approaches, they're all improved. One note of interest here is one of the approaches, and I believe that was the eastbound approach, was hitting level service D. So that's in year 2043. We can discuss that a little bit more as we go through this. One of the interesting facts is, if you went through the report, the delays on level of service for roundabouts and stop controlled for level service D, a delay is 25 to 35 seconds for a vehicle. On signals, level service C is 20 to 35. They have a little bit different rules on their level of services. So really your delays are pretty much the same between a level service D on a roundabout and a level service C on a signalized intersection. So they're still going to function probably about the same level of services in the mind of delay. And then obviously there's minimal right-of-way purchases here. They're mainly at the corners. We did put a number on that, and we'll speak more to that in the cost estimate portion when we get to it. And obviously this is the recommended alternative through the report, and that is simply because the signal warrants are not met at this point, which could create some other issues, as we'll discuss as we get a little farther into this. Any questions on the roundabout?
What appears to be some type of divider between the lanes as you approach Fuchs Road. Will there actually,
Those will be raised medians.
oh, they will, okay.
So they're more for directional, so they kind
Right.
of swoop you out a little bit and then get you in the direction that
Forces you to go.
Right. So these are pretty
Direction
standard
you're
design.
Oh, okay.
One other key note here is designers that do these have to be certified now by the state. So they do go through some rigorous classes to make sure that they're that certification.
Is that where additional
That'd be at each corner. Each corner actually needs a little bit, and that's simply for the roundabout size, and then we have a bypass lane, and then also doing the accommodations for the pedestrians.
And I'm not sure if this is the appropriate time in the discussion. I'm wondering, did they, account for,
Yes, they did look at that modeling. Obviously, with a roundabout, there is that potential that people are heading westbound, it can back into that. That is.
wonder, yeah. 'Cause
There-
I know it can back up the, into the hill on,
Yeah, they can back up on either one, I guess. You know, you want to
Oh,
look
yeah.
at it, there would be additional cost in regards
But
to the
it's-
traffic signal where we could have it connected between the closure of the railroad track and the signal to where we can allow traffic through on certain portions. There is within the roundabout too, by having that bypass lane, when you're heading westbound, right turn bypass, there is an option for people to get out if it does start backing up. They can still make that movement and head north. So there are a few options that are presentable.
and roundabout, I wonder if have it would be.
That, or you do have the option of continuing through it and doing your whole circle and getting out.
Well,
So there
logical
are,
people.
there are pros and cons when we get to the railroad. One of the pros that you're gonna notice with roundabouts versus a signalized intersection, obviously you're gonna back up in a signalized roundabout, you'll have a free flow after that. Train leaves, people clear out. It's gonna clear out quicker than a signalized intersection, because signalized intersections do not stay open for everyone to clear out on Pewits. There'll be timing mechanisms put in with that, so there'll be some stopping and delays there.
Matt, we don't have any control over train traffic during our peak periods. Do you know how many times a day is that crossing?
We can get that information.
Oh, I mean, it's not, I'm wondering if that really is a critical element. I mean,
At least 7, right? 7 each way.
okay, but there are freight
Yeah, there are.
trains that use that as well.
Correct, we can actually get that information. We can look up the report on
Okay.
the last time that we've done on the actual railroad. They do provide that information to us if we needed. It's more of a, not time of day, but it would give us the number of trains throughout the day for a 24-hour period.
Significantly because of the train traffic, which, what's that, Bob?
I don't think it's the train traffic that's the bottleneck. I would say eastbound to north and south, that is a nightmare. Especially when you get a car that's trying to turn left and a car that wants to turn right, but doesn't really understand how to turn right within the lane. Stand still there.
Quite honestly, and
Backs up behind.
it was mentioned in the report that really is an alternate entrance to Drexel Town Square and to Woodlands. I see a lot of traffic going
Yes, I agree, there has been an increased amount of northbound, eastbound to northbound traffic. And that was one of the reasons I think we addressed it in 2017, was to try to provide that refuge, because we knew the potential there when we did Drexel Town Square. I can't speak for the Drexel Town Square development. I believe there was one done. There was one done on Drexel Avenue corridor, the entire corridor. I think it did reach down to this intersection, and at that point, it didn't warrant signals, so it was not pursued. And we've done a number of studies on this intersection, just never met those warrants, so we never really truly pursued it. We're starting to get to that point where we're getting more and more complaints, and then you're getting failures during the PM peaks on the minor approaches, which is about time to look at what we can do.
We've abandoned the full boulevard build out.
We haven't been given that direction, but we haven't pursued it any further. That's been on the shelf for 9 years. It was one of the first things I did when I got here. So it's been a long time personally. And what I would recommend is that we do not do a 4-lane. I don't think it requires that because of the traffic.
Continue by the name.
Typically traffic, volumes, turning movements,
Quiet zone
accidents.
was
I think the quiet zone was built based on minimal cost. That's what that was built on. Not, we had a footprint that we had to work within, and we did it within that footprint to get that quiet zone at that point, because we would have been spending a significant amount of dollars to relocate the arms and railroad equipment. So we went minimal there. That's not to say that we can't keep it the way it is now. My recommendation would be at the 2-way left turn lanes, the twiddle, would be just through lane in each direction and then opposing left turns throughout the corridor that would provide traffic to get out of the way and give a nice efficient flow to traffic. That's what I would recommend out of our engineering department as we move forward for the remainder of Pewits. The volumes just don't dictate to spend that. We have any other questions on the roundabout? I mean, we're gonna have questions and answers at the end of this, I'm sure, as we get to it. But you had any initial ones?
I think it's a good idea and it'll solve the problem we have.
That's my sentiments at this point. So cost estimates. You guys were provided some cost estimates, just roundabout numbers here. Really not roundabout, I guess we got down to almost to the pennies here. So traffic signals, 766,000, so what this does is it minimum required to achieve the installation. This does not address any other failed pavements. This does not address any site issues. This is turn lanes and any kind of exterior curb or widening that we would need to do. It's very, very minimal. That's what we kind of directed them to do. What does it cost to get signals in? And that's it. So we went through and Andrew did an exercise for us to see what the cost would be to do everything which they consider inside the influence area. Now the influence area is where turn lanes begin. So anywhere from one end to the other end, north, south, east, west, to do that construction. We estimated that roughly at $400,000 additional dollars. So that would put your costs a little about 1.1, 1.2 million. If you're to do it correctly and we were never back in the intersection for at least another 15 years. And that's what we would recommend to do. Not to go in there a little bit here, come back 10 years later, do some more work. It's like, if we're gonna come in there, we should get in there and do the job. Get out of there. Minimize the impact to the residents, traveling public through that intersection. Obviously your yearly maintenance cost, you have electrical power you have to pay for, you have knockdowns, you have equipment failure. Knockdowns are probably minimal. That's probably more of you have pedestrian signals or things along those lines or standalone poles. We would recommend monotubes being put in here. Everyone's aware a monotube probably can be hit by about a semi and not move much. So they're pretty large objects there. But you do have additional costs other than typical roadway maintenance. So roundabout, we have it estimated at 1.25. This includes the entire intersection, everything that's within that drawing that you have provided. This probably would also allow us to address maybe some of those site issues from the east going westbound because of the reaches of that intersection itself, that design. So we added some additional real estate cost in there. What we did is we looked at the assessed values of the properties along there. We took the highest assessed value, which was double to the other ones. We applied that along everything and then added an additional $5,000 to $6,000 for consultant fees to assist us in that work. So we just kind of threw that $25,000 in that additional money to help. Obviously, our maintenance costs are very standard for roadway. So there's really no initial increase from what we're doing right now. But obviously, your maintenance would be based on your typical roadway maintenance as we move along in the process of the standard deterioration of roadway. Do we have any questions on the costs? I mean, I know it's very vague and very general, but that's what we've been provided at this level.
More of a comment. Reading the initial report, I quite honestly was leaning toward the traffic signal option, simply because of the cost estimate and the level of service numbers were similar. So you were getting the same type of service at a significantly less expense. Unless I missed it, that $400,000 additional funding that was needed for the reconstruction was that in your initial report? Okay.
That was not in the initial report.
So then with now that those projects are almost identical, I certainly would be in favor of the roundabout. The biggest issue with the roundabout is causes for those that are not familiar with a how to navigate those areas. Last night as I was reviewing, but at least, I think you pointed out, Matt, you're at least moving. There's not a point where you're stuck at a traffic signal, you're backed up 5 feet at that traffic signal. So for a driver, stuck. At least with the roundabout, you're moving.
I think navigating a single lane roundabout is a lot easier. Then you're crossing across lanes depending on where you're going, and that gets to be kind of sketchy. But single lane, you get in there and
Travel the ones off of
yeah, oh
in
yeah.
Berlin. Oh my.
That's an
Okay, so I mean, that's just a comment, Matt, so I'm glad that that was cleared up. Is that estimate for the traffic signal option? Close to the same, right?
That is correct, and that's why I kind of wanted to be very transparent here on the cost estimate. This was more of us looking deeper and deeper into it, just to make sure that we were starting to compare more of an apple to apple as far as reconstruction aspect of it. That's not to say that we don't do, or we're not recommended to do traffic signals and we only do the minimal. That is a decision that you, as a recommending board, would have to make, and finally the council would have to make. It is always our recommendation out of staff, obviously, to make sure we do it right, with the least impact now and in the future for the residents.
Ed,
Yep.
have you got something?
Yeah, and I do have a question. Based on Mike's experience with Rawson, are we dealing with any sort of crazy utilities within the roundabout that we need to worry about?
No, we wouldn't have any problem.
Okay, not that we go down that route now, so much fire, huge fiber line or something that goes right through where we
There's huge water there.
We do have a large water main, but it's on the north side already, side of the pavement.
All right.
Well, thank you. It took me a while to, kind of digest it all, but it was.
Oh. Yeah, go ahead.
I think the traffic count was 11,000 a day.
Correct.
You obviously probably have data on peak hours.
They do. I wouldn't have that. I mean, I'd have to go through the report to provide that to you.
And is that assumption that those are, because I think the overall thing with the changing the intersection over there again today, just to make sure I recalled what I would. The surprise factor going west is my biggest concern on any change. Folks coming over the top of the crest of the hill, how many folks of that 11,000 are locals that are doing it every day? 4,000. And how many strangers are actually going through the intersection that are going to surprise them? Without
So
having- somehow drawing
obviously,
attention to the
obviously
fact
we
that
don't have, you know, whether they're traveling out of town or not. It is my
no, license plate.
opinion that,
People do it.
you know, we can put down counters, and we have in the past. Those numbers really don't change from day to day. So in that saying, you don't have your weekend peaks, you know, where you jump up and there's more people visiting. It's a very consistent, you know, level or
We
amount
can
of
assume
traffic.
The assumption is people are traveling it regularly.
So I would assume, that would be my assumption, that you're not seeing these major increases. Secondly, this is a primarily residential, obviously to get to commercial, but we don't have an interchange. You know, we don't have anything major where people are actually getting off that you would typically see from out of town or non-locals, whether that be Franklin, South Milwaukee. They're still typically traveling these intersections and roadways. That's what I typically would assume at this point with this intersection, because you don't see much change.
The only thing because you visually can't see it. I'm wondering, is it practice to warn folks it's coming?
There are different, you know, alternatives and options out there.
This is all always going west. Sorry.
Yep. Yeah. You know, you usually can have some kind of message board, permanent ones we could include. There are, you know, LED signs that you can have that are more, you know, visible as far as warning coming into it. You know,
Is it up front or after the fact? If
you could put it up front. You could do it, you know, with the project. So there are options out there.
I'm not sure what other people think, but that's my concern.
Well, you know, and that's the thing, is we've had this intersection for how long, and how many people still push that right turn lane to go through. You know, so it's drivers' habits. You know, it's drivers' habits and drivers' way they drive, and you can't fix that. You can only try to address it to a minimal. Can't spend all that money to fix everything. So, one other note, I know we've been talking a lot about the volume. So from our existing data we have to what they consider design year, they're using a 1.5% increase annually in traffic. This is more than what the standard DOT is, traffic projections. They did this based on what they've seen historically, plus the potential for development in the area. If we do not reach this 1.5% annual growth, it's very likely that roundabout's going to be at a much higher level of service. It's also going to mean that the warrants probably are not met in 10 years for a signal, or 15. I don't know. I couldn't tell you. These are all assumptions at this point. But what it does do is it does now put if the signalizers are chosen, it does put, you know, an improvement there that on off-peak hours, you're going to have delays that could potentially, you know, frustrate drivers with signalized intersections. One car comes up on the minor road, it stops everyone on Pewits, you know, for 35, 45, 55 seconds. You know, that becomes a, you know, frustration after a while continually when you see one car coming in to do a right-hand turn, signals change over and no one's sitting there now. Whereas a roundabout doesn't allow that to happen because it's a free flow. So there's a couple other thoughts that, you know, in this process you got to consider also. So there's a lot coming here, but that's just another thing I wanted to put out there, you know, that we've looked at too throughout this process. Yep.
Are there other intersections that are areas of concern? Have there been similar number of crashes at an intersection? I guess my point being, are we going to have to, I know this one because I travel that route every day, but I mean, are there other areas that?
Nothing that really comes, you know, on a standard basis. You know, if there's an accident, sometimes it gets brought up.
Right.
We'll look at the history of it, and it really actually doesn't come to fruition or any background history of continual accident issue. Nothing that we haven't already tried to address.
Okay.
So we're continually looking at these intersections, and we do consider roundabouts on every one that we look at. Just a matter of whether you can fit them in with the minimal impact. I mean, that's really what it comes down to.
I take it now this is for accepted practice, traffic control of the roundabouts.
Okay, I looked at Wisconsin Department of Transportation. Currently in the year 2022, they have 222 roundabouts throughout our state. 120 or 130 of those are actually local roads. So it is becoming a bigger practice on local roads. It's not a non. I mean, it's like 1% of the intersections are controlled by roundabouts. 8% are signals throughout the Wisconsin, and then the rest are uncontrolled or different type of control. So you put it into perspective. I don't know how many intersections we have in the state. A very large number. So they're getting to be more and more as you go. Yeah, so was I. Well, it's 1%. So I guess that the DOT controls, or that's on a DOT road. Yep. So I just wanted to move on here and just give you a couple quick frequently asked questions that they get on the DOT website. We kind of looked on the DOT website for this. Obviously, one of the questions, do roundabouts save lives? Obviously, we've kind of described that, but there's a 40% decrease in fatal and severe injury crashes. This includes the head-on T-bone collisions are eliminated because of the way the roundabouts are designed. So that would take care of our major crash issues, which was the right angle, considered T-bone. And obviously they are lower speeds, so most of them are side swipes at lower speeds. Creates a less severe accident, less property damage, less personal damage. Do they reduce congestion? Studies show that they reduce anywhere from 13 to 23% because you only need to yield. You're not actually stopping, sitting there, waiting. So it does improve the efficiency and the flow of traffic. And obviously the environmental benefits, this is one of the bigger ones that people are really kind of hanging their hats on. And it's the reduction of vehicle emissions and fuel consumption. Obviously that's because of the reduced number of stops and the duration of stops, because it is a free flow type intersection. One study done in Virginia had 10 intersections where they changed over to roundabout, and it showed 200,000 gallons of fuel per year they were saving, which is about 20,000 gallons, which nowadays is about $60,000 to $70,000 general public back in their pockets. So there are some benefits to our roundabouts. One of the bigger ones, obviously outside of these, are the efficiency and the flow. Very smooth intersections as long as people understand the driving of it, which is basically look to the left, yield to the traffic, and then enter. Very simple, standard things, but obviously it is not norm. I'll be the first to admit it, but they are very efficient. That's about all I have. You guys have any questions? We're here to answer them.
You probably told me this. The median, is it a curb median or is it?
So it is a curb. It's a mountable curb. Typically, they also
Can get over a
they
little
also
bit?
put in like 10 feet of concrete, and that is so semis or larger vehicles can actually track their back trailers onto that area to get around those. So 140 foot inscribed is your center diameter. Is the smallest you're going to want to go, but it would accommodate your semi vehicle.
The legal truck route?
It's not a legal truck route.
They go there anyway though. I mean, they're gonna go over
It
the
is an oversized truck route for DOT, I believe, right? When we did mention that to Grafe, and they did consider that in their design, their initial preliminary.
But then they're gonna do it anyway.
Yes, we will. And it also,
No, I'm talking the truckers.
truckers will always do what they want to do. They look at the Google, and it tells them where to go. I mean, like most of us, right? Shortest route, you're going to do it. And by state statute, they're allowed. Shortest route to delivery. And that's just nothing we really can do based on state statute. I think there's been very minimal. Well, at that point, we were just looking at whether it met signal warrants. And we looked at the accident history and then what minor modifications at very minimal dollars that we could do. Believe at that point, engineering was under the direction or provided the direction to just, if we're going to improve this intersection in the future, signals is what everyone assumes. So that's one of the reasons why we kind of did the raised median and laid it out in that sense was, potentially you could pop down your signals real quick and be done. So no, roundabouts were not looked at as an alternative at that point, or whether we met signal warrants. Money that's been dedicated in this year's budget would cover the design for a roundabout or signal. So we have enough money based on what Grafe has done. They would just move into phase 2 and get it started. So as far as funding in the future, there has been discussions internally with Max and Andrew in regards to how either one of the projects would be funded, and there are some options that they've provided. Which would have to be provided to you guys.
When would this begin?
So we would do our design this year, and then we would be looking at constructing it next year. It actually kind of falls in very well between all of the projects that are going on. This year, Howell Avenue is going to be under construction for the water main.
Yes.
And then I would be looking at 24 for this intersection, because we probably have to shut it down. And then in 25, South 13th Street will be under construction. So we want to kind of wiggle this in so we're getting it in where we're not shutting down roads, or parallel roads that we would be using for detour would be under construction.
Is that going to impact road volume?
I think there might be some minor
May-
impacts.
Maybe shut a lane down in that local area, but you'll still have a lane traveling.
How long do you anticipate?
Yes. I mean, it would be probably not much different than the one that was done on Franklin. I'll probably do a little tighter control on mine. Not give
You're
them
talking
so-
about a 51st?
Drexel?
51st and Drexel,
Okay.
yes. So that, I mean, if you can imagine that, that's probably not much different than what this is proposed. And from what I understand, during school PM and peaks, that functions beautifully. From what I've been hearing from the people that travel it every day. Get through it real quick. And obviously the high school students somehow have managed to figure out how to drive it.
I'm not a fan of roundabouts, I'll just say that. The information given was very helpful and valuable, so thank you very much for that. Going with a 1-lane versus a 2-lane, I can buy into it a little more, but I just not my part of my DNA. So I could get over. The problem is I travel that way all the time because I live off of 13th and Puget, so I'm impacted by this significantly. But I do understand the fact that the flow of traffic, it'll keep moving. So in the big picture, I guess that right decision.
Globally, Matt, we look at this in terms of if we ever do the 4-lane, unless there's a Pugh's interchange built, I don't think why we'd ever.
No, the traffic volumes that you would need are reaching 18 to 20,000 vehicles a day. That's when you start considering going to 4 lanes. I don't anticipate that.
That would require reconstruction of this. If you built a roundabout, it would have to be redone. Because you'd have to add a second lane.
Probably.
So, I mean, is that formally part of our road plan? The 4-lane boulevard? Or is that just kind of pipe dream?
I think, I believe it was one of
Because there's plenty of right-of-way there, so obviously
plenty-
somebody thought about
There's
it.
plenty right away. There's a lot of sections throughout the city where they had the thought of pushing 4 lanes all the way through. One would be Puget's all the way to the lakefront. It's never going to happen. So there's a lot of, thought process, I guess, that went into their planning years and years ago. I think the city has just developed in a different manner, so we now have to reevaluate those.
Because you can picture, I mean, even right here, I mean, with Barrett's new units, there's 300 units there. There's probably some units in Target that added to the volume. There's some single family to the west that would be in.
I think that's why when
But
we
it
looked at,
isn't- it isn't 7,000.
no, when we looked at the 1.5% increase, that would probably address most of those. So the intersection would still function at a high quality and a good level of service in year 2043 with that increase in traffic.
Looking down from above,
Any other questions I can answer?
Charlie may be here. Right? 2043?
Yeah,
Yeah, running the show maybe. Yeah, we gotta, I think there's a couple things here.
Yeah, your motion would have to include what your recommendation to council would be, what your alternative would be.
Yeah, there's 11 and 12. 12 is at addendum.
Oh, that's the addendum.
Yeah, 11 is the one. Oh, you Boozy.
All set?
Yeah, that's you guys good?
You guys ready?
Fred?
All right.
Yep, all the question.
All right.
Motion?
Nick, move the recommend proceeding with the design of
Alderman Dukenyak, could you include what your preferred alternative is?
preferred alternative would be roundabout.
A specific name for that match you want?
Roll call.
Nick, aye?
Gale, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Kelly, aye?
Hey, thank you, guys. Number 12.
So this item is largely considered a pass-through. These are the MMSD rates that are dictated to us by their cost recovery manual. What they do is they take the amount of money that we're ultimately going to owe to them for treatment of our wastewater. They convert that then into connection charges and volumetric charges, and that charge our customers. The only variation on here is this adjustment to volumetric change of -14 cents. And we'll do that adjustment every few years in order to kind of stabilize or equalize the amount that we collect pay MMSD versus what we actually pay MMSD. So if that tends to drift a little bit, as it does, and that can happen if there's inconsistencies in our estimated occupancy per home or the gallons per capita that somebody uses, that can drift a little bit. It has drifted. We haven't adjusted it in a couple of years. So we're adjusting it down now. That's the only difference. Other than that, these are all dictated by MMSD.
Paying them whether you like it or not.
Right. Got a motion for number 12?
I'll move to approve the MMSD customer rates for 2023.
Roll call.
Nick, aye?
Gale, aye.
Guzekowski, aye. All right.
Okay, I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second.
Roll call.
Nick, aye?
Gale, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
We can never adjourn.